10 Golden Age stars who were exposed as predators. Behind the glittering facade of Hollywood's golden age lurked darker truths that studios spent millions to conceal. The stars who graced silver screens as heroes, lovers, and icons harbored secrets far more disturbing than any role they ever played. The studio system wasn't just about making movies, it was about manufacturing myths, explained a veteran Hollywood historian who requested anonymity. Stars weren't just actors, they were products, investments worth millions. When these investments behaved in ways that threatened public acceptance, the machinery of cover-up activated with ruthless efficiency. What audiences never saw were the elaborate systems created to protect Hollywood's most valuable assets from their own disturbing behavior. Studio fixers paid to silence victims, publicists who crafted wholesome public images for men with predatory private lives, and executives who viewed the exploitation of vulnerable women and children as simply another cost of doing business. There were no scandals the studios couldn't bury, revealed a former studio publicity department head. Payoffs, intimidation, career destruction for victims who spoke out. These weren't exceptional measures. They were standard operating procedure. The most shocking aspect wasn't the predatory behavior itself, but how normalized it had become within the industry. Most disturbing was how many of these men continued being celebrated long after their misconduct had become an open secret within the industry. Their stars on the Walk of Fame remained untarnished, while their victims' careers and lives lay in ruins. Their biographies highlighted artistic achievements, while conveniently omitting the human damage they caused. These weren't just badly behaved celebrities, noted an entertainment lawyer who has represented numerous victims of powerful Hollywood figures. These were men who systematically used their power, fame, and the protective shield of studio influence to prey on others, often the youngest and most vulnerable in the industry. Today, we're exposing 10 of Golden Age Hollywood's most shocking predators, the beloved icons whose dark behaviors were hidden from public view through a combination of studio power, media complicity, and a culture that prioritized box office returns over basic human dignity. From the swashbuckling adventure star with a documented pattern of pursuing underage girls to the comedy legend who terrorized his female co-stars, these stories reveal the stark reality behind Hollywood's carefully constructed fantasies. But first, we begin with the man whose very name became synonymous with inappropriate sexual conquest, a star whose predatory behavior was so notorious it entered the American lexicon as a crude euphemism that persists to this day.
From this night on, I use every means in my power to fight you. Chicken!
Errol Flynn, Hollywood's original predator. With his dashing good looks and swashbuckling charm, Errol Flynn embodied the Hollywood adventure hero. Films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood made him one of Warner Brothers' most valuable stars, a box office draw who personified daring heroism and romantic appeal. Off-screen, Flynn's behavior was far darker than anything in his swashbuckling films, particularly regarding his persistent pursuit of underage girls. The allegation: statutory offenses, wicked, wicked ways, noted a film historian specializing in Hollywood's darker history. Flynn's predatory pattern became impossible to ignore in 1942 when he faced serious legal charges involving two teenage girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterlee, both under 18. The resulting trial became one of Hollywood's most sensational scandals. The court proceedings revealed disturbing details about Flynn's behavior with minors. Both teenagers testified that Flynn had inappropriate relations with them, Hansen at a party at Flynn's home and Satterlee aboard his yacht. Though Flynn was ultimately acquitted, the trial exposed a pattern of behavior that studio publicity had previously managed to conceal. Flynn was the subject of a sensational 1942 trial where he was accused of statutory offenses by two teenage girls, explained the historian. While he was acquitted, his reputation as a hedonist who pursued underage girls became an open secret in Hollywood, cementing the phrase "in like Flynn," a crude reference to his predatory success. What makes Flynn's case particularly disturbing is how the studio system worked to protect him despite ample evidence of inappropriate behavior. Warner Brothers mobilized its considerable resources to defend their valuable star, hiring private investigators to dig up dirt on the teenage accusers and deploying publicity teams to shape public opinion in Flynn's favor. The studio's priority wasn't justice, but asset protection, observed the historian. Flynn was worth millions in box office revenue, The welfare of teenage girls was, by comparison, inconsequential to the studio executives making these calculations. Even after the trial, Flynn's predatory behavior continued largely unchecked. His autobiography, aptly titled My Wicked, Wicked Ways, revealed a man who viewed women primarily as conquests and showed little remorse for his actions. Despite public knowledge of his behavior, his career continued with only minor interruptions. What's perhaps most disturbing about Flynn's case is how it established a template that would be repeated throughout Hollywood history, noted the historian. A powerful man behaves inappropriately with vulnerable, often underage women. The studio machinery activates to protect him, and even when the behavior becomes known, his career continues while the victims are forgotten or discredited. Flynn's legacy reveals how thoroughly the entertainment industry separated artistic output from personal conduct. Despite his well-documented misconduct, his films continue to be celebrated without asterisk or acknowledgement of the darker reality behind the charming screen presence. Flynn set the pattern for how Hollywood would handle predatory stars for decades to come, concluded the historian. His case demonstrated that with enough studio power, publicity savvy, and public charm, a man could engage in profoundly troubling behavior and not only survive but remain beloved by audiences worldwide. While Flynn's misconduct eventually became public through his trial, our next subject's predatory pattern was disguised by his carefully cultivated image as a lovable tramp, a cinematic genius whose pursuit of extremely young women was hidden in plain sight for decades. Charlie Chaplin, the genius who preyed on teenagers. Charlie Chaplin's iconic Little Tramp character made him not just a star, but a fundamental figure in cinematic history. His artistic contributions, from the Gold Rush to modern times to The Great Dictator, established him as perhaps the most significant filmmaker of early Hollywood. Behind this artistic genius lurked a disturbing pattern that modern audiences find difficult to reconcile with his cultural status. A documented history of pursuing, grooming, and marrying teenage girls when he was a middle-aged man. The allegation, inappropriate relationships with minors, stated a film historian who has extensively researched Chaplin's life. Chaplin had a documented pattern of pursuing and marrying teenagers. He married 16-year-old Mildred Harris when he was 29, and 16-year-old Lita Gray when he was 35. His relationship with 18-year-old Una O'Neill, which began when he was 54, also drew intense scrutiny at the time. What makes Chaplin's behavior particularly troubling from a contemporary perspective is the power dynamic involved. As one of the most famous and wealthy men in the world, his attention to these young women carried immense influence, creating relationships with inherently imbalanced power structures. Chaplin's pursuit of Lita Gray began when she was just 12 years old and cast in his film The Kid, explained the historian. By the time she was 15, their relationship had become inappropriate, and when she became pregnant at 16, Chaplin married her to avoid criminal charges. The age gap and circumstances suggest a pattern of grooming behavior that would be immediately recognized as predatory by modern standards. Gray's own accounts of their marriage, detailed in divorce documents, describe disturbing behavior by Chaplin, including coerced intimate acts that she found degrading. When their marriage ended, Chaplin used his tremendous power to limit Gray's settlement and damage her public image. These weren't simply May-December romances, as they were often characterized at the time, noted the historian. These were relationships between one of the world's most powerful men and very young women or girls with virtually no power, experience, or resources to advocate for themselves. Chaplin's relationship pattern continued with Una O'Neill, the 18-year-old daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill. Though this marriage lasted until Chaplin's death, unlike his previous relationships, the 36-year age gap and the fact that he began pursuing her when she was barely an adult fits his established pattern of seeking extremely young women. While the Chaplin-O'Neill marriage lasted and by some accounts was happy, it cannot be viewed in isolation from his established pattern of pursuing very young women, observed the historian. When a 54-year-old man with a documented history of pursuing teenagers begins a relationship with an 18-year-old, the context of his previous behavior becomes relevant to understanding the dynamics at play. What allowed Chaplin to continue this pattern without significant consequence was a combination of his artistic stature, his immense wealth and power, and a cultural context that viewed young women primarily as objects rather than individuals deserving protection and agency. Chaplin's genius became his shield, explained the historian. His artistic contributions were so significant that the industry and public were willing to overlook behavior that would be considered criminal by today's standards. This prioritization of artistic output over basic ethical standards regarding young women's well-being established a precedent that would continue throughout Hollywood history. While Chaplin's relationships with teenagers were technically public knowledge, they were reframed through the lens of romantic love rather than predatory behavior, a deliberate narrative strategy that protected both Chaplin and the industry that profited from him. While our first two subjects' misconduct was at least partially documented during their lifetimes, our next figure's predatory behavior remained largely hidden until one of his victims finally spoke out decades later, revealing how a celebrated director used his power to terrorize a young actress.
You know, he hasn't arrived yet.
Oh, but you said 3 o'clock.
Oh, I know. Maybe it's the traffic.
Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense and harassment. Alfred Hitchcock's cinematic brilliance transformed the thriller genre and established him as one of the most influential directors in film history. Movies like Vertigo, Psycho, and Rear Window remain masterpieces of suspense that continue influencing filmmakers decades after their release. For actress Tippi Hedren, however, working with the master of suspense meant enduring something far more disturbing than anything depicted in his films: a pattern of obsessive behavior, harassment, and alleged assault that derailed her promising career. The allegation, obsessive harassment, noted a film historian specializing in Hitchcock's work. In her memoir, Tippi, actress Tippi Hedren alleged that the director developed an obsessive fixation on her during the filming of The Birds and Marnie. She accused him of inappropriate advances, stalking behavior, and deliberately sabotaging her career when she refused his advances. Hedren's account describes a disturbing pattern that began during the filming of The Birds in 1963. Initially flattered by Hitchcock's attention and the career opportunity he offered, Hedren soon found herself the object of increasingly controlling and inappropriate behavior from the director. In her autobiography, Hedren describes Hitchcock attempting to force physical contact in the back of a limousine, explained the historian. When she resisted, his behavior reportedly became more hostile and controlling on set. During the filming of the famous attic scene in The Birds, Hedren alleges that Hitchcock used real birds rather than the mechanical ones he had promised, subjecting her to 5 days of having birds thrown at her and attached to her body with elastic bands. The situation allegedly worsened during the filming of Marnie in 1964, where Hitchcock's obsession intensified. According to Hedren, the director made explicit advances toward her, which she rejected, leading to increasingly hostile treatment on set. She accused him of inappropriate advances, stalking, and deliberately ruining her career when she rebuffed him, said the historian. After she rejected him, Hitchcock allegedly kept her under contract but refused to allow her to work, effectively holding her career hostage for 2 years, while refusing to release her to work with other directors who were interested in casting her. What makes Hitchcock's alleged behavior particularly disturbing is how it reflects themes present in his own films: the objectification and control of blonde women, obsession that turns to cruelty, and psychological manipulation. In Hedren's case, these weren't just artistic themes, but real behaviors that cause genuine harm. Hitchcock's films often explore the psyche of troubled, obsessive men fixated on controlling beautiful blonde women, observed the historian. According to Hedren's account, his real-life behavior mirrored these fictional scenarios, suggesting an unsettling blurring of the line between his artistic preoccupations and his treatment of actual women.
I never write a lyric that would properly express my gratitude. But reverting back to my job, keep the show moving, will you?
Okay, thank you.
Arthur Freed, the producer who exposed himself to Shirley Temple. Arthur Freed stands as one of the most significant producers in Hollywood musical history. As the head of the Freed unit at MGM, he produced classics like Singin' in the Rain, An American in Paris, and The Wizard of Oz, films that defined the golden age of movie musicals and continue to be celebrated as pinnacles of the form. Behind this impressive artistic legacy lies a disturbing incident involving America's most famous child star, an encounter that reveals the vulnerability of even the industry's youngest and most protected performers. The allegation, Inappropriate behavior with a child star, stated a film historian who has studied the Hollywood studio system. Freed was a legendary MGM producer, but Shirley Temple exposed him in her 1988 autobiography, Child Star. She alleged that when she was just 12 years old, Freed exposed himself to her during a meeting in his office. Temple's account of the incident is both specific and disturbing. In 1941, following the end of her contract with 20th Century Fox, a 12-year-old Temple was being courted by MGM. During a meeting in his office, Freed allegedly made an extremely inappropriate advance toward the child star. According to Temple's autobiography, Freed began their meeting by declaring, "I have something made for just you," before exposing himself, explained the historian. When the 12-year-old Temple responded with nervous laughter, Freed allegedly became angry and ordered her out of his office, effectively ending MGM's interest in signing her. What makes this incident particularly revealing is how it demonstrates that even Temple, the biggest child star in Hollywood history, whose parents were known for being protective, was not immune to predatory behavior from powerful industry figures. Temple's experience highlights the vulnerability of all children in the studio system, observed the historian. If Shirley Temple, a child so famous and theoretically protected that her drink was named after her, could be subjected to such behavior from a top producer, one can only imagine what less prominent child performers might have experienced. Equally telling is how Temple handled the incident. Rather than reporting Freed's behavior, which likely would have been futile given his power at MGM, she kept the experience private for decades. Only in her 1988 autobiography, long after Freed's death and her own exit from the entertainment industry, did she finally reveal what had occurred. Temple's decades-long silence about this incident reflects the reality that children in Hollywood had virtually no recourse against powerful adults who behaved inappropriately, noted the historian. Even a star of Temple's magnitude understood that accusing someone of Freed's stature would more likely damage her career than result in any consequences for him. The contrast between Freed's artistic legacy and his alleged behavior creates a troubling contradiction that the entertainment industry has largely chosen to ignore. His musicals continue to be celebrated without asterisk, while Temple's disturbing account remains a footnote rarely mentioned in discussions of his work or the studio system he represented. Freed's case exemplifies how artistic achievement continues to overshadow misconduct in Hollywood's historical narrative, explained the historian. His musicals are rightfully recognized as groundbreaking artistic achievements, but this recognition rarely acknowledges the troubling behavior of the man behind these celebrated works. Temple's experience with Freed serves as a stark reminder that Hollywood's golden age, for all its artistic triumphs, operated within a power structure that left even its youngest and most famous performers vulnerable to exploitation and misconduct with little hope of protection or justice. While Freed's alleged behavior involved a one-time incident, our next subject represents something potentially more troubling: a beloved leading man whose charming public persona may have concealed a pattern of misconduct that remained hidden for decades.
I've just returned from the 8th Air Force, commanded by General Akers, flying with men who were aviation cadets only a few months ago.
Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood's dark secret. Clark Gable's position as the king of Hollywood seemed unassailable. His performances in classics like Gone with the Wind, It Happened One Night, and Mutiny on the Bounty established him as the definitive leading man of his era. Handsome, masculine, and irresistible to women both on and off screen. For decades, Hollywood history recorded his relationship with actress Loretta Young as one of the industry's great secret romances. An affair between stars that resulted in a daughter, Judy Lewis, whose parentage remained officially unacknowledged for years. The true nature of that relationship, however, may have been far darker than the romantic narrative suggested. The allegation, non-consensual encounter, secret child, noted a film historian specializing in Hollywood's golden age. For decades, it was believed Gable and Loretta Young had a consensual affair that resulted in a daughter, Judy Lewis. However, after Young's death, her family revealed that Young had described the encounter as non-consensual, a secret she kept to protect both of their careers, and due to her devout Catholic faith. The relationship between Gable and Young began during the filming of The Call of the Wild in 1935. Young, a devout Catholic who took her faith seriously, later described an incident that occurred while the production was filming on location, an encounter that resulted in her pregnancy. According to family members, Young confided late in life that the encounter with Gable was not consensual. explained the historian. She reportedly used the phrase date assault, though that term would not have existed in 1935. Young kept this characterization private during her lifetime, maintaining the public fiction that Lewis was her adopted daughter rather than her biological child with Gable. Young's handling of the pregnancy reflected both the moral standards of the era and the professional realities facing actresses in the studio system. When she realized she was pregnant, she concealed the pregnancy by traveling to Europe, then returned to give birth in secret. She later adopted her own biological daughter, creating an elaborate fiction to protect both her career and her child from scandal. The lengths Young went to in order to conceal her pregnancy and her daughter's true parentage demonstrate the impossible position women in Hollywood faced, observed the historian. A non-consensual encounter with a major star left her with no acceptable options, reporting it would have been career destruction, while acknowledging an out-of-wedlock pregnancy would have violated both her Catholic faith and the morality clauses in her studio contract. Judy Lewis, the daughter born of this relationship, did not learn that Gable was her father until adulthood. She would later describe the psychological impact of growing up surrounded by secrecy and sensing that something about her origin was being concealed from her. Lewis's experience reveals the generational impact of Hollywood's culture of secrecy around misconduct, noted the historian. The child born of this alleged non-consensual encounter spent decades not knowing her true parentage, creating psychological wounds that extended the damage beyond just Young herself. What makes this case particularly complex is the impossibility of ever knowing with certainty what occurred between Gable and Young. Young's own characterization of the event came late in life and was shared privately with family members rather than publicly. Gable, who died in 1960, never acknowledged Lewis as his daughter or addressed the nature of his relationship with Young. The Gable-Young case demonstrates how effectively Hollywood's machinery of image management could rewrite even the most troubling incidents into palatable public narratives, explained the historian. What may have been a non-consensual encounter was transformed into a secret romance in Hollywood lore, with the actual experiences and trauma of the woman involved erased from the official story. This case raises difficult questions about how we should understand and contextualize such allegations when they emerge decades after the events and after the death of those involved. It also highlights how power imbalances in Hollywood created conditions where misconduct could occur with minimal consequence for perpetrators, while victims bore both the immediate trauma and the long-term burden of silence. While Gable's alleged misconduct remained hidden for decades behind romantic mythology, our next subject's inappropriate behavior was experienced by multiple women who worked with him. A beloved comedian whose on-set conduct contrasted sharply with his public persona.
Of the Little King, the last character, Little Joe, it made it a little difficult for us.
Jerry Lewis, the comic who terrorized his co-stars, Jerry Lewis's manic energy and rubber-faced comedy made him one of America's most beloved entertainers. His partnership with Dean Martin and subsequent solo career established him as a comedy legend, while his annual telethons for muscular dystrophy created an image of Lewis as not just funny, but fundamentally decent. Behind this charitable public image, however, lurked a man whose treatment of women on his film sets reportedly revealed a much darker side, one that remained largely concealed until his victims finally spoke out decades later. The allegation, inappropriate behavior, harassment, stated an entertainment journalist who has covered Lewis's legacy. In a 2022 Vanity Fair report, co-stars Karen Sharp and Hope Holiday accused the comedian of misconduct and harassment in the 1960s. Sharp alleged Lewis assaulted her in his office and then ostracized her on set when she refused his advances. Sharp's account of her experience working with Lewis on the 1964 film The Disorderly Orderly describes a disturbing encounter that occurred during what was supposed to be a costume fitting. According to Sharp, Lewis dismissed everyone else from the room, then proceeded to physically restrain and inappropriately touch her despite her explicit refusal. Sharp described Lewis grabbing her and touching her inappropriately while she struggled to free herself, explained the journalist. When she firmly rejected his advances, his behavior reportedly turned retaliatory. According to Sharp, Lewis then refused to rehearse with her, instructed crew members not to speak to her, and effectively isolated her on set for the remainder of the production. Hope Holiday, who appeared in Lewis's 1961 film The Ladies' Man, shared a similar experience. According to Holiday, Lewis invited her to his office, pressed a button that locked the door, and began making unwanted advances and inappropriate comments. When she refused him, she alleges he became angry, but ultimately allowed her to leave. The accounts from Sharp and Holliday suggest a pattern of Lewis using his position as star and director to isolate women and make unwanted advances, noted the journalist. Both women describe Lewis attempting to use his power on set to coerce physical interactions, then responding with anger or retaliation when rejected. What makes these allegations particularly significant is how dramatically they contradict Lewis's carefully constructed public image. As the host of the Muscular Dystrophy Association telethon for decades, Lewis presented himself as a humanitarian motivated by compassion for vulnerable children, an image at odds with the predatory behavior described by his former co-stars. Lewis maintained one of the most dramatic splits between public persona and private behavior in Hollywood history, observed the journalist. The tearful man begging viewers to help Jerry's kids on the telethon bore little resemblance to the reportedly vindictive figure who punished actresses who rejected his advances. The long silence surrounding Lewis's alleged behavior reflects the limited options available to actresses during Hollywood's studio era and beyond. Women who resisted advances from powerful men like Lewis risked not only their current role, but potentially their entire careers in an industry where word could spread quickly that they were difficult. Both Sharp and Holliday continued working in the industry after their encounters with Lewis, but both describe having to simply endure the aftermath of these experiences, explained the journalist. There was no HR department to report to, no sexual harassment policies, and certainly no #MeToo movement to provide support or accountability. The decades-long delay in these allegations becoming public, only emerging after Lewis's death in 2017, demonstrates how effectively Hollywood's power structures silenced victims and protected powerful men from consequences for inappropriate behavior. Lewis died universally celebrated as a comedy legend and humanitarian, noted the journalist. The women who experienced his alleged misconduct had to watch him receive accolades, honors, and public adoration, while their experiences remained unacknowledged and uninvestigated for over half a century. Lewis's case reveals how completely a star's carefully managed public image could contradict their private behavior, and how thoroughly the studio system and Hollywood power structures could suppress victim stories to protect valuable talent, regardless of their conduct. While Lewis's alleged misconduct remained hidden for decades, our next subject became the center of Hollywood's first major scandal, a case that revealed the industry's ability to destroy not just careers, but lives when valuable stars were accused of serious misconduct.
If it wasn't, you couldn't do that with it. Certainly.
Well, why can't you do that with it?
Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, Hollywood's first major Predator scandal. Before Charlie Chaplin became cinema's defining comedian, Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was the king of silent film comedy. His physical agility, despite his size, combined with genuine comedic talent, made him one of the first true movie stars, commanding an unprecedented $1 million contract with Paramount Pictures in 1921. That same year, a scandal erupted that would not only destroy Arbuckle's career, but establish the template for how Hollywood would handle allegations of serious misconduct by its stars for decades to come. The allegation, serious misconduct causing harm, noted a film historian specializing in early Hollywood, the first major scandal of the Golden Age. In 1921, Arbuckle was accused of assaulting actress Virginia Rappe, who subsequently died from internal injuries. Although Arbuckle was eventually acquitted after 3 trials, the scandal destroyed his career and painted him as a predator in the public eye. The incident occurred during a Labor Day party at San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel, where Arbuckle was celebrating his new $1 million contract. Virginia Rappe, a 26-year-old actress, became seriously ill during the party and died days later from peritonitis caused by a ruptured bladder. What happened in the hotel room became the subject of sensationalized press coverage, multiple trials, and nearly a century of debate among film historians. The prosecution alleged that Arbuckle's actions during an encounter with Rappe caused her fatal internal injuries. Arbuckle maintained his innocence, claiming he had found Rappe ill and had only tried to help her. After 3 trials, the first 2 ending with hung juries, Arbuckle was acquitted, explained the historian. The jury in the final trial took the extraordinary step of issuing a formal apology. Acquittal is not enough for Roscoe Arbuckle. We feel a great injustice has been done him. There was not the slightest proof adduced to connect him in any way with the commission of a crime. Despite this legal vindication, the damage to Arbuckle's career and reputation was irreversible. The scandal had generated months of lurid headlines, with newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst discovering that Fatty Arbuckle stories significantly boosted circulation. The resulting moral panic led to Arbuckle being blacklisted from the industry he had helped build. The newly appointed head of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, Will Hayes, banned Arbuckle's films and his name from American screens, noted the historian. Though Hayes eventually lifted the ban, theater owners refused to show Arbuckle's work, fearing public backlash. His career was effectively over. What makes the Arbuckle case particularly significant for understanding Hollywood's handling of misconduct is how it established patterns that would repeat throughout the industry's history. The initial rush to judgment, the media's preference for sensationalism over accuracy, the industry's willingness to sacrifice an individual to protect its broader interests, all became standard features of Hollywood scandal management. The Arbuckle case was essentially a trial run for how the film industry would handle serious allegations against valuable stars, observed the historian. The lesson Hollywood took from the scandal wasn't about protecting vulnerable women, but about developing more effective systems to prevent such allegations from reaching the public in the first place. The human cost of the scandal extended far beyond Arbuckle's career. Virginia Rapp, the woman who died, was posthumously portrayed as immoral and unstable in an effort to discredit her, a victim-blaming strategy that would become standard practice in Hollywood's handling of misconduct allegations for decades to come. Rapp's reputation was destroyed as part of Arbuckle's defense strategy, explained the historian. She was portrayed as promiscuous, mentally unstable, and with a history of health problems, all to suggest her death had nothing to do with Arbuckle's actions. This character assassination of victims would become a standard tactic when stars faced misconduct allegations. The Arbuckle case serves as a dark beginning to Hollywood's long history of scandal management, establishing approaches to handling misconduct allegations that prioritize protecting the industry's image over uncovering truth or achieving justice. These patterns, first visible in 1921, would continue throughout the Golden Age and beyond, enabling predatory behavior to continue with limited accountability. While the Arbuckle scandal played out in public view, our next subject's alleged misconduct remained largely rumored until recent years, when new allegations brought renewed scrutiny to one of Hollywood's most revered leading men.
You're afraid, you kabaddi.
Never call a man that, no matter what, never.
Kirk Douglas, the hero with a dark allegation. Kirk Douglas's chiseled features, intense performances, and legendary career made him one of Hollywood's definitive leading men. With iconic roles in films like Spartacus, Paths of Glory, and Champion, he embodied a particular kind of masculine heroism that defined an era of American cinema. In recent years, however, long-standing rumors about Douglas's behavior have gained new attention, including a particularly disturbing allegation involving one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses. The allegation, inappropriate behavior with Natalie Wood, stated an entertainment journalist who has covered Hollywood misconduct. This is a long-standing Hollywood rumor that gained traction recently. In 2021, Lana Wood, Natalie Wood's sister, publicly alleged in a memoir that Douglas behaved inappropriately with a teenage Natalie Wood during a meeting at a hotel, an event that allegedly traumatized her for life. According to Lana Wood's account in her memoir, Little Sister, the incident occurred when Natalie Wood was 16 years old. Already a successful child actress transitioning to adult roles, she allegedly had a meeting with Douglas at the Chateau Marmont Hotel, a meeting arranged by their mother, who hoped it would lead to casting opportunities for her daughter. Lana Wood claims that what was supposed to be a professional meeting turned into something very different, explained the journalist. According to her account, Natalie Wood returned to the car disheveled and upset, and later confided to her sister that Douglas had behaved inappropriately with her in the hotel room. What makes this allegation particularly disturbing is both Wood's young age at the time and the reported involvement of her mother in arranging the meeting, highlighting the vulnerability of child actors in a system where parents sometimes prioritized career advancement over protection. The alleged incident with Douglas exemplifies the particular vulnerability of young actors in the studio system, observed the journalist. Child stars like Natalie Wood were often placed in adult environments with little protection, and the power differential between established stars like Douglas and teenage actors created conditions where inappropriate behavior could occur with minimal consequence. The allegation against Douglas remained largely within Hollywood rumor circles during his lifetime. Douglas, who died in 2020 at age 103, never addressed these specific claims publicly. His son, actor Michael Douglas, has similarly not commented on the allegations made in Lana Wood's memoir. The Douglas allegation highlights the complexity of evaluating claims that emerge decades after alleged incidents, particularly when the accused is no longer alive to respond, noted the journalist. Nevertheless, such allegations deserve consideration within the broader context of how power operated in Golden Age Hollywood, especially regarding young female performers. What gives Lana Wood's allegation particular resonance is how it aligns with broader patterns regarding the treatment of young actresses during Hollywood's studio era. Many successful actresses from this period have described being placed in vulnerable situations with powerful men as teenagers, with the implicit understanding that refusing advances could limit career opportunities. Whether or not this specific allegation can be conclusively verified, it reflects documented patterns regarding the vulnerability of young actresses in the studio system, explained the journalist. Teenage girls were routinely sexualized on screen while simultaneously being placed in professional situations that exposed them to potential exploitation off-screen. The allegation against Douglas serves as a reminder that Hollywood's power structures didn't just enable misconduct in the moment, but also ensured that such behavior could remain hidden for decades, protected by studio publicity departments, media complicity, and victims' understandable reluctance to challenge beloved industry figures. While Douglas's alleged misconduct has emerged recently as a single incident, our next subject represents something different: a beloved entertainer whose carefully constructed public image concealed a private life that contradicted everything his fans believed about him.
Everyone was so helpful. Bobby Kennedy rushed right over to help him pack.
Bob Hope, America's entertainer, Hollywood's exploiter. For generations of Americans, Bob Hope represented wholesome entertainment at its finest. His USO tours entertaining troops, his family-friendly comedy, and his longevity as a beloved cultural figure created an image of Hope as the ultimate show business professional and patriot. Behind this carefully managed public persona, however, reportedly lurked a man whose treatment of women contradicted every aspect of his wholesome image. A serial philanderer who allegedly used his power and connections to facilitate a lifestyle of exploitation hidden from his adoring public. The allegation: exploitation, inappropriate behavior, noted a journalist who has researched Hope's career. While a beloved figure publicly, biographies, such as Full Service by Scotty Bowers, have alleged that Hope was a voracious womanizer who used his power to exploit women and relied on fixers to procure partners, presenting a stark contrast to his wholesome image. According to multiple accounts, including those from people who worked closely with Hope during his decades-long career, his private behavior was an open secret in Hollywood circles, known to industry insiders but carefully concealed from the general public who embraced him as an American icon. Hope reportedly maintained a public marriage to his wife Dolores for 69 years while engaging in constant extramarital relationships, explained the journalist. What distinguishes Hope's case from typical celebrity infidelity was the alleged scale, systematization, and exploitation involved, with fixers, handlers, and other enablers reportedly facilitating a constant stream of women for his entertainment. Scotty Bowers, a well-known Hollywood fixer whose memoir Full Service detailed the private lives of many Golden Age stars, claimed that Hope was among his most regular clients, seeking women even while publicly presenting himself as a devoted family man and often making jokes about marital fidelity in his comedy routines. The contrast between Hope's public and private personas was particularly stark, observed the journalist. While entertaining troops overseas with wholesome comedy and USO shows presented as patriotic service, he was allegedly using these same tours as opportunities for sexual conquest, behavior that would have shocked the millions of Americans who welcomed him into their homes through his television specials. What makes Hope's alleged behavior particularly relevant to understanding Hollywood's predatory patterns is how thoroughly the entertainment industry's publicity apparatus protected his public image. Despite behavior that was apparently known to many within the industry, Hope's wholesome persona remained intact throughout his life. Hope's case demonstrates the effectiveness of old Hollywood's image management systems, explained the journalist. A star could maintain completely contradictory public and private lives, with the industry's full cooperation in maintaining the more marketable version, regardless of its accuracy. The machinery that protected Hope's image wasn't unique to him, but represented standard industry practice for valuable personalities. The allegations about Hope's private behavior gained wider attention only after his death in 2003 at age 100, when various memoirs, biographies, and accounts from those who had worked with him began painting a picture at odds with his carefully managed public persona. Hope lived long enough to ensure his legacy was secured as an American entertainment icon, noted the journalist. The revelations about his private behavior came too late to significantly impact the public's perception of him, which had been shaped by decades of carefully managed publicity, presenting him as the ideal entertainer and patriot. Hope's case illustrates how thoroughly Hollywood's image management could separate public perception from private reality, creating and maintaining beloved cultural figures whose actual behavior might have shocked the very audiences who embraced them as representatives of American values and entertainment. While Hope's alleged misconduct remained largely hidden during his lifetime, our final subject's troubling behavior occurred on camera. A celebrated actor and director whose artistic brilliance was used to justify behavior that left lasting trauma for his female co-star.
My aunt gave me some dough for the train. I kept it and hopped the truck. Look, if we have a little dough and a gun, we can leave.
Marlon Brando. Genius used to justify exploitation. Marlon Brando revolutionized screen acting with his raw, naturalistic performances. From A Streetcar Named Desire to The Godfather, he created some of cinema's most unforgettable characters while establishing himself as perhaps the most influential actor of his generation. This artistic genius, however, reportedly led Brando to believe himself exempt from normal ethical boundaries, culminating in an incident during the filming of Last Tango in Paris that has come to symbolize how artistic ambition can be used to justify exploitation. The allegation, non-consensual filming, stated a film scholar specializing in cinematic ethics. While known for his acting genius, Brando, along with director Bernardo Bertolucci, faced immense backlash for the butter scene in Last Tango in Paris, 1972. They admitted to conspiring to film the scene without telling actress Maria Schneider the full details beforehand to get a real reaction of humiliation, which Schneider later described as feeling violative and deeply traumatic. The scene in question involved Brando's character using butter as an improvised lubricant in an intimate scene with Schneider, who was 19 years old at the time of filming. While the physical act was simulated, the emotional experience was all too real for Schneider, who had not been informed about the nature of the scene before filming began. According to later interviews with both Bertolucci and Schneider, the director and Brando had planned the use of butter without informing Schneider, explained the scholar. This was deliberately done to capture her genuine reaction of surprise, shock, and humiliation, prioritizing authentic emotion on screen over the actress's right to provide informed consent about how her body and emotional responses would be used. Schneider, who died in 2011, spoke about the experience in a 2007 interview with the Daily Mail, saying, "I felt a little humiliated, both by Brando and by Bertolucci. After the scene, Marlon didn't console me or apologize. Thankfully, there was just one take." She clarified that while no actual intimate contact occurred, I was crying real tears. I felt humiliated, and to be honest, I felt a little violated. What makes this case particularly significant is how it reveals the way artistic justifications were used to override basic ethical considerations. With Brando's status as a genius actor and Bertolucci's position as an auteur-director, creating a context where Schneider's consent was deemed less important than capturing authentic emotion on camera. Bertolucci later admitted the deliberate deception in a 2013 interview, saying, "I wanted her reaction as a girl, not as an actress," noted the scholar. This distinction reveals the fundamental ethical problem. He was treating her as an object to be manipulated for artistic purposes, rather than as a professional colleague with the right to make informed choices about her performance and the use of her body. The incident had lasting consequences for Schneider, who described feeling exploited by both Brando and Bertolucci. Though she continued acting, she never worked with either man again and spoke about how the experience had deeply affected her psychological well-being. Schneider's experience highlights how women's bodies and emotional responses were treated as raw material to be manipulated by male directors and actors, observed the scholar. Her consent was considered irrelevant compared to the artistic vision Brando and Bertolucci were pursuing, a dynamic that reflects broader patterns of exploitation in the film industry. What distinguishes this case from others on our list is that the exploitation occurred within the filmmaking process itself, captured on camera and distributed worldwide as art. The butter scene became one of the film's most discussed moments, with critics praising its raw intensity without considering the ethical issues surrounding how it was created. For decades, film criticism celebrated the scene's power without examining the consent issues involved in its creation, explained the scholar. This reflects how thoroughly artistic considerations were allowed to override ethical ones in discussions of film, with actresses' experiences deemed irrelevant to assessments of male artistic achievement. When Bertolucci's 2013 admissions about the scene's creation resurfaced in 2016, they generated renewed outrage, with many actors and directors condemning the treatment of Schneider. This belated recognition reflected evolving standards regarding consent and exploitation in the filmmaking process, standards that came too late to protect Schneider, but may help protect performers today. Brando's participation in this deception reveals how even actors celebrated for their psychological insight and emotional depth could compartmentalize these qualities when it came to the actual treatment of female colleagues, using artistic justifications to override basic ethical considerations about consent and dignity.